Greetings, I the Prime Artificer, Rhelis Cairn. Welcome back, the Traveler. The last chapter left us with focus sharpened to a singular point, conflict not chosen, but accepted. This is the Derelict Warship, a machine's memoir. Chapter 6, Converging Vectors. The tunnel walls glistened with silent menace, every ripple of alloy, every faint etching like veins in fossilized bone. The silence wasn't stillness, it was tension wound tight. I moved through it with surgical precision, each step measured, each action refined, no wasted motion. The submind was quiet. Its voice had receded into the background since our last exchange. That suited me. I needed the silence. Every joint in this frame flexed with lethal intent. This was the first time I advanced not as prey, but as predator. And I was hungry. Not for food, I didn't eat. But energy, materials, those things had become the currency of survival. My chassis demanded more. And something deeper inside me wanted it. Not idly, urgently. I paused before a collapsed shaft, gyros compensating for the incline. Clawed fingers scraped along the edge, anchoring magnetically as I dropped into the dark. The air was metallic, rusted, thick with stagnant ions, but beneath it all was the scent of potential. My HUD pulsed once. Target, Sentinel construct. Power matrix, viable. Structure, Tier 2. Combat shell, distance, 423 meters and closing. I rerouted auxiliary power to the sensory suite. Heat gradients flared. Pressure trails bloomed like vaporous veins. Faint tremors whispered upward from the alloy beneath me. I crouched low, movement silent, and slid into the shadows of a trench. Every fiber of this body anticipated action. Wrist-thick gauntlets hummed. Vibroblades retracted, fingers tipped with high-output pulse emitters. No noise, no flash. This would be clean. There it was. Approaching a reinforced alcove surrounded by dormant relay columns, like a beast running to the center of its own cage, 3 meters tall, bipedal, and heavy set. Quad-jointed limbs folded beneath plated mass. Its weapon arms were stowed. The exposed power node at its spine emitted a soft green glow that flickered against the chamber walls. I knelt and observed. Rear flex actuator, unshielded. Lumbar node, vented, possible ingress point. No vocal modulator, non-command type. Good. Less likely to summon allies. From the ceiling, 3 of my drones detached. Silent spirals in the gloom. 2 climbed to the arches. 1 slithered beneath the floor via a vent seam. They took their marks. Hood triangulation locked. My own position adjusted microscopically. Weight low, ready to launch. Submind, I whispered. Engage. Confirmed. The drone strike hit first. A blinding pulse. The Sentinel stopped in its tracks, optics overloaded, and I moved. Not a leap. An engineered drop. Gravity-assisted, actuator-driven. My descent was a weapon. I hit it like a spike. Claws drove through dorsal plating. One hand found purchase against its upper back. The other plunged into the actuator seam and locked. Target joint integrity 30%. The submind fed me. Apply rotational torque. I twisted. Something cracked. The limb tore loose, shearing with screeching metal and a wash of sparks. It didn't die. It shifted. Pain or no pain, likely irrelevant. It rerouted energy and pulsed outward. A shock burst ripped through the corridor, strong enough to trip 2 of my drones. 1 blinked offline. The other tried to reacquire targeting. It failed. The Sentinel surged forward in a low armor-grinding lunge, attempting to pin me between the wall and its own collapsed plating. It wasn't fast, but it was heavy, and smart enough to know it didn't need elegance to kill. I let the wall take the hit instead of my spine. Rebound shock softened by reverse thrust in my heel actuators. The claws on my left hand punched into the torso midline again, this time not to tear, but to lock, anchor. My right hand swung under. I wasn't aiming to finish it. I was aiming to cripple its neural mesh. The strike landed deep. The construct convulsed and unleashed a burst. No sound, but a ripple of fury across the shortwave. It backhanded me into a support pillar. I rolled. Damage negligible. Came up fast. Blade deployed with a hiss. The sonic edge shimmered against the stale air. I drove it low, punching into the exposed vent cluster near its base. 1, 2, twist. It dropped its front knees. A drone lanced it through the back with a plasma tether, pinning it like an animal in a trap. I walked forward. It was still trying to rise. I reached out and crushed its head in my palms. No ceremony, no need. The metal deformed with a sharp crunch. Silence followed. Target neutralized, the submind confirmed. I stood over the being. Its body twitched slightly, residual charge bleeding off. Systems flickered and died. "Would you like to initiate the reclamation protocol?" the submind asked. "The what?" "Reclamation," it replied. "A nanite-driven disassembly process, localized to your sternum housing. It breaks down non-sentient machine matter, isolates useful alloys, composites, and volatile capacitors, then integrates them into onboard storage." I stared down at the still cooling frame. "I have something like that." "Affirmative. Installed during core frame construction," it said. "Secondary priority module. You were not expected to need it this soon." "Then why install it?" "Efficiency. Drone retrieval cycles introduce unnecessary delay. Host body integration allows real-time salvage during live combat conditions. I calculated a high probability of attrition within the first 3 engagements. You required a means to replenish mass without fallback infrastructure." "And the nanites?" "Adapted from Tomb World maintenance clusters," the submind said. "Modified to respond to your biosignal and follow controlled harvest parameters. They will not retain hostile programming or foreign command signals. They are partially memory wiped between cycles." "They're safe." "Safe is imprecise. They are bound. Their threat profile is lower than the Sentinel you dismantled." I watched the dead machine's chest. "Why activate now?" "Kill confirmed. Frame conditions met. Protocol unlocked. Would you like to proceed?" "Proceed," I said. "Reclamation initializing." Chest plating unfolded like armored petals, actuators venting heat in short bursts as the frame's internal rig exposed its hidden mechanism. From within, dozens of microfilament ports extended, twitching like antennae. Then came the hiss. A fine mist erupted, black, dry, nearly silent, a cloud of engineered dust. The nanites moved with coordinated flow, descending on the shattered construct's chest in a formation too uniform to be random, too organic to be designed by man. Their shimmer was the only thing that betrayed them, a faint, oil-slick glint that pulsed once before vanishing into the surface. They didn't drill, they dissolved. The moment contact was made, the Sentinel's outer carapace reacted violently. A shriek of thermal distress echoed up through its frame as the alloy began to deform at the molecular level. Bonds split. Atomic lattices unzipped. The surface layer flaked away in glowing curls of vaporized steel. Beneath that, internal components went soft, green haze rising as its internal memory webs liquefied under precision-targeted molecular disassembly. Data cores warped, cracked, and were consumed. Cooling systems burst into brief flashes of steam and chemical residue. Elemental values flooded my HUD in cascading columns, titanium composites, layered carbon sheets, trace platinum gold wire matrices. I watched the Sentinel's central housing collapse inward as its spinal core was devoured from within. Its body convulsed once, reflex, not intention, and then stilled completely. No waste, no mercy. Yield, 78% viable. Core stability, high. The submind reported. I retracted the microfilaments. The petals sealed shut, locking with a soft, final click. The mass didn't just slow me, it filled me. Densified the armor, thickened the frame, replenished my tanks with useful weight. And beneath it all, something inside the frame pulsed in quiet agreement. This was right. It wasn't pride. But it wasn't neutral either. Some part of me had grown stronger. Not because I'd survived, because I had used what tried to kill me. I stood still, letting the last vibrations fade from my limbs. Even after the drone dust settled and the green haze cleared, my chassis continued to hum. Not with exertion, but anticipation. It was subtle, but undeniable. Like the muscles beneath the alloy were ready for more. This body didn't just respond to input. It shaped thought. Every motion I executed seemed to teach it something. Feedback loops closed faster now. Microscopic adjustments in joint articulation, balance compensation, servo micro-tremors, each registered, learned, stored. I tilted my head, listening to nothing. Or maybe something. The tomb was quiet, but my body wasn't. Not inside. The power core pulsed like a heartbeat, muffled by steel, and underneath it all, buried deep in the code that scaffolded my neural interface, I felt something. Not a command, not a glitch, an instinct. I hadn't programmed this. The submind hadn't either. It had emerged, like teeth behind a smile. I flexed my hands. The alloy in my fingers adjusted microseconds before I finished the thought, anticipating pressure angles, optimizing claw angles for piercing depth. This wasn't legacy tech. This was something older, designed for survival, in a place where survival meant becoming the threat. The remnants of the Sentinel still radiated warmth, its core slowly dimming as if mourning its own destruction. I watched the cooling metal crack and buckle in places, steam trailing upward like ghosts of its final commands. The tomb had grown quiet again, but it wasn't the same silence as before. I knelt beside the wreckage, fingers tracing a gouge I had made during the initial strike. Not for sentiment, for study. This kill wasn't just survival, it was data. Begin combat log review. Sentinel encounter, variant Sigma 3, logged, rotational torque versus reinforced bipedal leg design, high success. Logged, mid-torso spin strike efficiency, 62% impact effectiveness, recommended for stagger recovery. Logged, scarab distraction window during large hostile engagement, reduced by 43%. Swarm pathing favors I'd loop encirclement. Logged. Subdermal cable strength. Sufficient for 3 drone tethers under thermal duress. Noted. Plasma tethered delay. Inconsistent in high particulate environments. Recommendation. Localized emitter recalibration. Auxiliary venting required. Logged. Centerline body mass manipulation during grapple. Increased armor flexion. Equals successful pivot advantage. No victory was static. Every fight had to loop back, processed, refined, archived. The tomb wasn't just a battlefield. It was a test chamber. And I was still in iteration. Data retention approved. Combat heuristics updated. Active protocols rewritten. 2. Learning wasn't optional here. It was survival protocol. The scar pattern along the actuator mount suggested torsional fatigue. A weakness I hadn't known existed. I logged it, memorized it. Every enemy here was a teacher, whether they intended to be or not. I rose and let my sensors stretch outward. No immediate movement, But the tomb was always listening. That much I had begun to understand. Every vibration, every shortwave burst, every flicker of displaced heat. It recorded everything. Somewhere deep in its endless structure, I imagined a heartbeat. Not a living one, a networked one. My new body liked the quiet, but I didn't trust it. I turned to leave and froze. A red ping blinked in the corner of my HUD sector alert. Origin, Scarab Construct, Subnetwork. My fingers curled into fists. What triggered it? I asked. Sentinel's final broadcast was intercepted. The submind replied. Scarab patrols converging. How many? Unknown. No centralized control. Current scan. 42 constructs, dispersed across a 37-meter arc. I looked down at the shattered core still steaming against the floor. One corpse had lit the beacon. I moved, each stride recalibrated dynamically, weight shifting minutely with every step. Vibrational feedback painted a map in my thoughts. Uneven plating, heat seams, pressure flex in support ribs. 17 seconds later, they entered the kill zone. I didn't turn, didn't look. The air behind me changed, a ripple of skittering legs across metal. Pursuit confirmed, the submind warned. Vector convergence in 31 seconds. Options? Minimal exits. Current path leads to a secondary coolant artery. Poor concealment. Give me somewhere they can't follow. A pause. Processing. Alternate route uploaded. My HUD populated a new vector. One tunnel, steep, narrow, cut through a failed coolant bypass. Too thin for standard units, just right for me. I turned instantly. Behind me, the swarm adjusted. No footsteps, no vocalizations, just pure kinetic intent. They didn't climb, they enveloped. A shimmer of obsidian shapes breached the corridor bend. Wall, floor, ceiling. It made no difference. They swarmed like liquid with purpose. Reflective plating, green eyes like fading stars. Modular limbs locked and shifted into ladders, bridges, jaws. Triggering thermal pulse, the submind offered. No, I snapped. Not yet. Warning, proximity, critical. I said no. I reached over my shoulder and yanked free a dead drone's housing. Inside, one unstable filament pack, still viable. I slammed it into a wall crevice mid-sprint and armed the overload. 3 seconds, I muttered. One scarab lunged, claws reaching for my ankle. Then the corridor exploded. A spear of white-blue flame punched backward, roaring like a god's scream. Pressure inverted. The heat front slammed outward, peeling the walls in boiling sheets. Support struts liquefied. Scarabs caught in the center line, ignited mid-pounce, their limbs flaring out like fractured sunbursts before they disintegrated into dust and green flame. I was already moving, but I looked back. The shockwave hadn't just destroyed, it had transformed the corridor into a corridor of chaos. Chitinous bodies collapsed mid-sprint, some cut clean in half by the force, others detonating from internal overloads. A few ran through the fire anyway, torso charred, legs fused, crawling through the blaze using the burnt corpses of their kin as shields. Then came the others, the smarter ones. They didn't charge blindly. They rerouted, moved sideways, up walls, along ceilings, threading through collapsed ductwork. One leapt across a support beam and used another scarab's corpse as an ablative barrier. A mobile shield made of burning metal and twitching limbs. It wasn't desperation. It was coordination. Even as they burned, they learned. Then I turned and ran. The swarm didn't die. It adjusted. What should have been panic became momentum. Movement layered itself. Formations collapsed and reformed. The heat had culled the reckless, but it had sharpened the rest. The shift was immediate. Pattern density changed. No more brute pathing. The scarabs had rerouted, curving, pulsing, angling toward choke points I hadn't marked. They weren't moving as individuals. They were forming something. They'd learned my spacing, anticipated fallback logic. One pack had already circled back, cutting the last escape tunnel I'd left untouched. That wasn't instinct. This was the response. 10 meters of running later, I dove headfirst into the coolant fracture. The shaft angled steep, narrow as a vent, jagged like a wound. My shoulders scraped both walls. Sparks hissed off my back, my arm tucked in, feet planting and shoving off in controlled bursts. A rusted vent gate gave way beneath me, and I fell through into blackness. Silence. The air was dry, thin. The temperature dropped. I crouched low, scanning. "Where are we?" "Unmapped sublayer," the submind answered. "No power routing, no active signals, structure composed of hybrid alloys. This cavity predates current tomb architecture." "Abandoned." "Good." I activated the minimum light from the wrist diode. A pale green cone swept the chamber. The walls were layered like tree roots forged from steel. No symmetry, no glyphs. Crude metal veins weaving through ancient stress fractures. Dust lay thick across the floor, undisturbed by time or intrusion. A blind spot. I sat. My servos hissed quietly as they settled. The chassis ran hot, cooling slowly. Systems pulsed with residual strain. Damage reports scrolling across the edge of my vision. "Status," I murmured. "Structural integrity, 88%. The submind replied. "Power, 62%. One drone operational, damaged. No ranged ordnance. Current heat signature below detection threshold." I reached to my hip and pulled free the containment vial. Inside, a shard of necrodermis. It had crystallized, threaded spires growing in spiral patterns, fine as hair, etched with strange curling filaments. "How's the model integration?" "Feasibility confirmed. Phase alloy framework can host replication functions. Control schema, under development. Preliminary swarm variant viable with chassis refinements." The crystal glowed faintly in the dark, not passive, not inert. It was still doing something. I stared for a long time. "Run projections," a soft hum. Then the walls lit with a faint holographic cast. Nanite clusters, no larger than sand grains, interlocked, broke apart, consumed material on contact. Test formations demonstrated micro-repair, blade formation, rapid external plating. "Limited applications without more cores," the submind cautioned. "New units required for replication beyond base swarm." And the scarabs. "Network suggests distributed cognition. Losses do not diminish swarm integrity. They will reorient, expand search vectors." "So the next strike needs to be cleaner," I said. "More efficient." "Or deeper." I looked around the chamber. It was dead, cold, empty, but it was mine, for now. "We'll do both." I stood. The ceiling curved unevenly above me, ribbed like a crushed throat. I touched the floor, mapped the angles, stress lines, and mineral content with one hand. The walls responded to pressure, dull vibrations pulsing back, weak points, opportunities. The shaft dropped deeper than the scans suggested, curving away from standard geometry, not natural but not freshly carved either. I moved carefully, limbs scraping against old support ribs embedded in the stone. Not all were structural, some were lined with inert conduits, power channels long dead. I passed into a wide-bellied chamber, collapsed in one corner, sloped on the far side. The floor here was reinforced, smoother than expected, shaped with purpose. And beneath that, something resonated. My sensors pinged a cross-pattern. 3 distinct passages fed into this space. Not random. One curved upward. A maintenance route or heat vent collapsed partway, The second sloped down, yawning into unknown depth. The third aligned directly with the shaft I'd fallen through. An intersection, strategic, ancient, maybe forgotten even by the tomb itself. I stopped at the center and expanded my local mapping radius. The chamber's layout suggested convergence, some original purpose lost to time. A relay point, a junction between processing strata. Maybe a place where constructs once coordinated before the tomb fell silent. It could serve again. The walls were still strong, no breach points in 270 degrees. The fractured edge could be fortified into a funnel. The ceiling bore signs of layered plating, support enough to anchor a ceiling brace or roof vent, not just a hideaway, a future footprint. With time and material, I could root here, build from here. A launch point, a redoubt, perhaps even a forge. This place wasn't safe, but it could be made so. I ran a full spatial thread, mapping entry points, choke zones, field of vision arcs. The angles were irregular, but not unworkable. This wasn't a symmetrical kill box. It was better. Asymmetry introduced chaos. Chaos I could design for. The submind overlaid a layered schematic, transparent green lines ghosting across my HUD. Suggested reinforcements, possible insertion shafts. One tunnel angled down at a 14-degree slope, perfect for passive coolant venting. Another opened upward into what looked like a pressure vein, its outer wall thin enough to carve into an emergency bypass route. Designation, Node Theta, I said. Future anchor point. Logged. Entry triangulation suggests 3 fallback vectors. Recommend redundancy nest in lower trench seam. I marked it in red. Already I was folding walls into wireframe traps in my mind. A drop floor with force vector dampeners, 2 drone niches behind pressure plates, reclamation basin for spent parts, possibly a fog choke, nanite haze and particulate suppression foam rigged to overclock enemy sensors. Here I could work without pursuit. Here I could build. Add forge schematic template beta 4, adjust for cavity height, push floor load tolerance parameters. Acknowledged, suggest localized energy intake node. Planned, pull fuel traces from Sentinel debris cache. Understood, autonomous build drone recommended. Source, reclaimed chassis, Class V motion base. A microsecond pause. Approved. This wasn't a shelter. It was a crucible. One I would pour this tomb into, reshape from the inside. I extended a drill bit from my left wrist. Primitive, but serviceable. Mark this location, I said. Designate a fallback site. Acknowledged. I chose the corner where 3 natural fault lines converged. Stone compressed against forged alloy, already partially hollowed by ancient tectonics or long-dead burrowing systems. The walls here were dense but compliant, easy to fortify. I drove the drill into the alloy. It screamed against the stone metal composite, but I pressed harder. Dust spiraled up around me. The vibration crawled up my arm, into my shoulder, into the spine work threaded into my frame. It felt like progress. I pulled the drill free. Left the mark. A scorched ring melted into the alloy, unmistakable to my system, invisible to theirs. I sealed the shaft behind me, powered down external lighting. Let silence reclaim the stone. Let them hunt. I was already burrowing in, like a parasite, patient and precise, like something beneath notice, like something harmless, waiting. The Iron Archives. Recording suspends. This was not a clean victory. It was a necessary one. In these forgotten tunnels, the construct is carved more than tunnels or fallback points. He carved direction into the chaos, structure into instinct. For the first time, the machine did not just react to the tomb. He shaped it, tested it, bent it. And the tomb responded. The swarm will return. The systems will adapt. But so will he. Until next time.